On the shores of the Mediterranean, an ancient nation is reinventing itself. This isn't unusual. It's a normal process of history. In fact, since the fall of the Roman Empire, almost all of the European nations have done the same thing. What is different this time is the way that the country is doing it. In order to ensure its future, Catalunya is going medieval. On the 10th of June 2010, there was a massive demonstration in Barcelona. More than 1.5 million people filled the streets of the city. They did so to insist that the principles behind a medieval marriage contract, agreed to almost 900 years ago, were still valid today. The document that set out these principles was the Capitals Matrimonials de Barbastro, an agreement that voluntarily linked Catalunya and Aragon together in a mutually beneficial dynastic confederation. Voluntary and mutually beneficial were not exactly common concepts in the Middle Ages, but the 12th century was a desperate time for the Kingdom of Aragon. Landlocked and surrounded by enemies, it had to be constantly on guard just to survive. Luckily, its king, Alphonse I, was a fierce warrior who spent almost all his time with his soldiers. But saving his kingdom from its enemies wasn't the only reason for this dedication to arms. Alphonse had a severe aversion to women in general, and to one in particular, his wife, Queen Urraca. Urraca was proud and independent and openly defiant of her husband. Their marriage was hardly a model of domestic bliss. Finally, the situation became unbearable. A domestic squabble escalated to the point of actual open warfare between the two. It was now obvious to everyone that something had to be done. The church was consulted, the Pope intervened, and the marriage was annulled. Before, at least in theory, there was a chance of the marriage producing an heir, but now without a queen, the future of the kingdom after the king's death was cloudy. In 1134, the inevitable happened. Alphonse had planned to leave the kingdom to an order of knights, but his nobles rejected this idea and made his brother Ramir king instead. As long as he lived, the kingdom of Aragon would not fall into the hands of its enemies, but unless he produced an heir, it was only a matter of time. Ramon recognized the gravity of the situation and immediately began working on a solution. He was able to get a papal dispensation to temporarily give up his vows of chastity, and he quickly married Agnes of Aquitaine. She soon gave birth to a daughter, Petronella. Just over a year later, in August of 1137, a wedding contract was signed, and within a week, the bride, who had just celebrated her first birthday, was married to Raimon Berenguer IV of Barcelona. The marriage was a political masterpiece of medieval realpolitik. Every detail of the union between the two royal houses had been worked out. Ramir would abdicate after the marriage, and Petronella would become queen. The real power, however, would be held by Raimon, but he would take the title of prince instead of king out of respect for his wife's family, which was senior to the House of Barcelona in prestige. The two countries were to be under one crown, but both realms would preserve their own laws, their own institutions, and most importantly, their autonomy. The union of dynasties would diplomatically be called the Crown of Aragon, but Catalunya was the stronger partner, and its capital, Barcelona, would be the center of this dynamic new political force. For the next 300 years, This new strength fueled the ambitions of the leaders in Barcelona. Piece by piece, through conquest, negotiation, and marriage, they erected a confederation of equal partners that stretched from Aragon to Athens.
Diuen que un temps enrere una família molt influent va trobar a sota terra un canut d'agulles no gens corrent. L'hereu sense cap recança va destapar-lo i en un moment de dins del tub en sortiren prou minairons com per parar un tren. Treballeu, treballeu, que la civada, que la civada. Treballeu, treballeu, que la civada guanyareu.
The twists and turns of history are full of irony. Eating well is a central pillar of Catalan culture. In fact, most Catalans adhere to the concept with a quasi-religious fervor. Frozen food, fast food, food in cans, food you just add water to, these are foreign concepts to most Catalan tables. Bon pa, bon vi y bona carn fan bona sang is an old Catalan saying. Good bread, good wine, and good meat make the blood strong. However, it is quite possible that the seeds of their own national destruction may have been sown by a succulent, well-balanced feast. On the 29th of May in the year 1410, the good sisters of Valdoncella convent had an important visitor. King Martí the Humane was the guest of their abbess, Constanza de Cabrera, who was also the aunt of Martí's second wife, Queen Margarita. The king had had 4 children with his first wife, but all but one of them had died young. Sadly, the fourth, a son, also named Martí, had just died a few months earlier of the plague. This left the dynasty, once again, in the dangerous position of having no heir. The king was 32 years older than his new wife, and apparently the abbess felt that it was not only her family obligation, but also her patriotic duty, to raise the royal spirits to the task of siring an heir. She instructed the cooks to serve the king roast duck with a rich aphrodisiac sauce. After eating only a few bitefuls, the king complained of a stomachache. He took to his bed and died 2 days later. An innocent attempt to cure regal impotence had brought a proud dynasty to an end. Martí was the last in a line of Catalan rulers, the last of the House of Barcelona. For the future of his country, his death could not have come at a worse time. Castilian troops were gathered menacingly on the border. Aragon and Valencia were on the brink of civil war. The Catholic Church was divided between 2 popes, one in Rome and one in nearby Avignon, and plague and famine were killing thousands of people throughout Europe. The Confederation of Nations that made up the Crown of Aragon stumbled on for 2 years after the king's death, but its rich empire was coveted by many. There were half a dozen or so candidates for the throne. Castilla's candidate could not get the support of Rome, so they turned to the antipope in Avignon. He in turn needed the support of Castilla to survive, and threw his full efforts behind Ferdinand of Antequera from the Castilian dynasty of Trastamara. To keep up appearances, the question was turned over to a committee, but the fix was in. On the 28th of June 1412, 3 Aragonese candidates, 2 Valencians and 1 Catalan, voted, as they had been told, and made a Castilian prince ruler of the Confederation. From now on, Catalunya would be ruled by Castilian monarchs. Granted, it would take a couple of wars and 300 years of bureaucratic hair-pulling before Madrid could convince itself that Catalunya had been finally conquered. But somehow, the message never reached the ears of the Catalan people. And now today, with another confederation of independent states, the European Union, Catalunya and its people are once again asking the ancient question, why not?
Què és el que està passant avui en el nostre país, que és Catalunya? Doncs res més que una societat que fa 1000 anys que té un territori, una llengua i unes institucions que en el segle XIII, XIV i XV va estar en Europa. Va ser la formadora d'Europa en aquell moment. Catalunya no és un bolet dintre la història. Catalunya és la primera que després de Grècia i Roma instaura una democràcia i un parlament. I aleshores el que volem en el moment present és preguntar a Europa que volem tornar a ser un país, que volem tornar a ser el que en el seu moment va ser els ossatges de Barcelona,